Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Apt Wealth Partners regular event series. Today we're talking about retirement. Stop thinking and start planning. So welcome to any existing Apt Wealth clients. You'll have heard this before, but you're most welcome to listen in again. And welcome to any new family and friends of the Apt community. I'm Andrew Dunbar, Director of Apt Wealth Partners, and I've been helping people plan and live their best retirement for 20 years. It's a topic I love, and so I'm looking forward to chatting about it over the next 45 minutes or so. Just some housekeeping to start with. You've got a Q&A box on your Zoom menu there. We've got plenty of time for questions at the end, so any time throughout the presentation, just put your question in there, and I'll try to get to as many of those as I can at the end. We will be sending out a recording of this to all those who've registered, so you'll get a copy of it to review. And during the presentation, I'm going to run a couple of polls. Now, they're totally anonymous. No one can see your answers, but I'd really appreciate you participating. Helps us to get a bit of feedback and direct the conversation today. All right, a quick disclaimer, the information today is general in nature. It doesn't take into account your personal circumstances. You should always seek personal advice. So we're here to talk about retirement. And retirement is a topic that we love to talk about at Apt Wealth Partners. We love planning for it. We love living it with our clients. And I looked up the dictionary. Yes, remember the dictionary. You know, if today's generation were looking it up, they'd use some AI chatbot. If it was yesterday's generation, they might use Google. But I'm old school. I use the dictionary. And I looked up the meaning of retirement. And you know what it told me? It said, the act of leaving your job and stopping work, usually because you are old. Wow, whack. So look, I'm going to absolutely challenge that definition of retirement. That is not modern retirement. The current statistics say that a 65-year-old couple have a 50% chance of one of them being here in their late 90s. So we might not be doing jumping jacks and flying around the world at that time, but we could be doing that in our 80s, and that's a lot of life to live. And so this is our favourite quote at Apt Wealth Partners, which is, at your end, you'll regret the things you didn't do instead of the things that you did. And retirement is a time that everyone looks forward to. And I think we need to reimagine retirement. You know, life used to follow a predictable cycle, which was we studied, we worked, we retired, and we died. But now, you know, life looks different. People study, they go to work, they go back and study, they might have a career break, they go back to work, they go study, and then they might do some long-term part-time work while still living life to the full. And retirement really, it's a time for new beginnings, new successes, new experiences, and really building your legacy. And the key to doing that is preparation. Being mentally and financially prepared is what gives you the freedom to be able to do that. And unfortunately, retirement, it's a time that's generally not well planned for, and it means a lot of people don't live the ultimate retirement lifestyle that they really should have. So with that in mind, we want to help you take the first steps to plan your ultimate retirement. And so what we're going to cover today, we're going to have a look at how much you need to retire. What does retirement look like to you as an individual? Understanding your investments and your superannuation. We'll have a quick chat about estate planning, and then we'll talk about the transition into retirement and going it alone or doing it with a partner. So this stat I find quite incredible. That is 1 in 5 Australians think about retirement daily or often. And I can understand that. You know, we see it all the time. It's something that causes a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of change, a lot of things to think about. You know, how much do I need? Will my money last? All of these questions going around. So, you know, if you've been thinking about that, don't worry, you're not alone. And I think proper planning is what can alleviate some of this anxiety. Most of us just go through life. We make some decisions. We make some decisions in our life with our money, and really they're just guesses, and we're hoping that things will work out. But hope's not a strategy. Preparation is the key. So what I'd like to do is poll the room and ask the question, how much do you think you need to retire? What does the average couple need to retire comfortably nowadays? Is it 300,000? Is it 500,000? Is it 750,000? Is it 1 million? Or is it more than that? And I'd like to just set up this poll. If you could answer it, that'd be fantastic. I'll give you a second and then we'll see what the results are. So hopefully everyone's got that poll on their screen. Just give you a second to answer that. Okay, I'm going to finish that poll there. To share the results, so we had a small number in the lower figures and most of those responses in the upper figures there, but quite a range of responses, which is not unusual. That's expected. And it's very interesting when you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics and Association of Superannuation Funds. They actually release a study every quarter on what it's costing retired people to live and how much money they need to support that. And the latest iteration of this report, this was the result. For a couple to live a comfortable retirement, they said they need $690,000 at the point of retirement, and for a single, $595,000. Now, that's for a comfortable retirement, and their definition of a comfortable retirement is having a good car, good clothes, electronic equipment, eating out, regular domestic travel, and occasional overseas travel. So the question is 690,000 for maybe 30 years of retirement, who knows, maybe even longer with medical technology these days. Is that going to be comfortable for you? And the real answer to that question is it depends, because retirement looks different for everyone. Depends on the sort of lifestyle you want to live and how much money you want to spend. So, what does that look like for you? Do you want to cease work completely, or do you want to keep working and bring in some income? Are you planning to stay in your family home, or do you have plans to downsize that? What about cars? Do you want one? Do you want two? Do you want to drive a luxury Mercedes, or are you happy with a Toyota Corolla? Traveling, what does that look like for you? Are you happy traveling around Australia in your caravan, taking the odd cruise, or do you want to fly around the world business class every year? And then, of course, there's the kippers. Kippers, otherwise known as kids in parents' pockets, eroding retirement savings. So what does that support look like for you? Kids are staying at home longer. Some parents are helping them with their first homes, helping with grandkids' education fees. This all, of course, has a big impact with how much you need to retire. This is those figures out of interest. So at the moment, the Australian Bureau of Statistics is saying for a comfortable lifestyle, a single needs $51,805 per year, and a couple $73,000 for the year. They also measure this for a very basic, modest lifestyle with only the necessities. And for a single, it's almost $33,000 a year, and for a couple, about $47,000 per year. Those numbers have gone up quite a bit in the last 18 months or so with the spike in cost of living. And interestingly, that modest lifestyle, basic lifestyle, that's about the amount that the age pension would cover for the average single or couple. So where do you fit on that scale? We've got clients who are around those numbers. We've got clients who are double, triple, quadruple those numbers. It all depends on your lifestyle, what your goals are for retirement, and what you want to achieve. Now, regardless of where you sit on that scale, there are two types of retirees that we see. And The first type of person is represented in the blue on this graph. So you retire with a certain amount of money, and every year that amount of money, it's invested, it goes up and down with the markets, but each year it produces an amount of income. And for this first type of person, first type of retiree, that income is enough for them to do all of those things that they want to do and live the lifestyle that they desire. And the conversations with those people, when you see them on a regular basis, it's, oh, let us tell you about our latest overseas trip. Here's what our kids and grandkids are doing. We love to help out these not-for-profit organisations. You can just tell they're at ease with their money. They're sleeping at night. They're not worried about it, and they're getting on with life. But the second type of person either retires with less amount of money, or that amount of income that they're producing is not enough for them to sustain the lifestyle that they want. And so they're eating into some of their capital each year, and it's declining over time, which is not unusual. However, when you meet with these people, you can hear it in their voice. The conversation is more, do you think we could take this trip? Do you think we could afford to help our kids out? What's happening with these investments? How much income are we earning? You can just tell money's playing a lot more on their mind. It's causing them stress, and they just can't have the peace of mind to just get out there and get on with life. So, it's our mission to try and set people up as type number one. In a perfect world, that's great. But even number two, this is actually how the system is designed. You're meant to spend your life working and saving for retirement, and then spend that money over your lifetime. So you've got to plan, be prepared for that situation, and accept it that's what's going to happen, and still have the peace of mind that you can get on doing what you want to do. So finding out your number is key, and then how you're going to set yourself up to do that every year is important. And so you work through a number of things. Of course, you want to maximise your superannuation. You want to be tax effective. You want to access any government benefits. We know there's going to be market downturns. You want to be able to survive those, and you want to make sure you've got an income that can last a lifetime. But you're doing all of these things so that you have the peace of mind to go and live the life that you want. So it's really starting with, what do you want to achieve? What are your goals for retirement? And then how can you do all of these things so that you've just got peace of mind to get on with it? So once we've got your number, once you've worked that out, what you need to live on, you've got to work out, okay, where's that going to come from? Is it going to come from the age pension? Is it going to come from superannuation, from savings, from investments? A combination of those things. So let's talk about investments. And whether it's in superannuation or outside of superannuation, investments, very, very important that you understand them in retirement. And the first thing I can tell you about investing in retirement is you will experience downturns. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And in fact, it's likely that will happen every year. And we've already seen it this year, 2025. Trump, what did he call it? Liberation Day, announcing the tariffs across the world. And this caused a severe market downturn, which has since largely recovered. But we're more than 15 years now past the global financial crisis, and it's quite likely that something like that will happen again at some point in the future. Of course, no one knows when that will be. And this chart is really interesting to just work through this. What it's showing you is the grey bars are the annual return from the share market. So if you invested on the 1st of January and you just remained invested the whole year until the 31st of December, what would have been your return? And you can see they're generally handy positive numbers, 7 to 10%, sometimes more, sometimes less. But regardless of that, what does happen is these little red dots every year. And the red dots represent the biggest downturn during that year. So this is just a normal part of investing. Downturns will happen. Things will recover. Sometimes takes more than other times. So how do you set yourself up to protect you knowing that this is likely to happen? And there's one fundamental principle that we've found over our long journey helping retirees that's critically important here. And it's not so much about what you invest in, but it's about how you're invested in the structure of those investments. And what I've got here is just a simple representation of two different investment portfolios or superannuation portfolios. In the middle, that pie chart, that's the sort of standard, balanced, or growth fund that many employer super schemes will have. And what happens there, you've got some money that's invested in Australian shares, some in international shares, some property, some cash, some term deposits, etc. But there's thousands of investors in that fund, and each investor just owns a number of units in the fund, and then each unit has a price attached to it. So if you owned 1 million units in that fund, for example, and the price of each unit was $1, well, that would be your $1 million. Now, over time, those investments, they'll move up and down in value, they'll earn some income, and so it's that unit price that is moving up and down over time and giving you your return. Now, the second type of portfolio is represented more around the outside of that pie chart, where you have your own investments and you can see directly what they are. So you'll still have very similar investments. You'll have some Australian shares, international shares, property, fixed interest, cash. But firstly, you'll know exactly what you own, which in itself is comforting. You know, if we go through something like the global financial crisis and you see Commonwealth Bank in your portfolio, well, you know it's Commonwealth Bank. You know, yes, we're going through a rough period, but they're going to get through. They're going to be there at the end of that. They're going to continue paying a dividend. Their share price will recover. So it does help give you that peace of mind. But it's when there's a downturn, the financial impact of these two approaches really comes to the fore. And the best way to represent this is just to work through a quick case study. So let's have a look at Max and Jane and Global Financial Crisis Mark II. Okay, so both Max and Jane, they have $1 million in superannuation. They're drawing out $6,000 a month for their living expenses, which equates back to that figure that a couple needs for a comfortable retirement. Now, Max, he's got that unitised fund approach, the balance fund that we had a look at. And so what's happening with him is he is actually selling units in the fund every month to get his $6,000. Okay, now if the unit price was $1, well, Max has to sell 6,000 units in that month to get his $6,000. And so he hopes that that unit price will just continue going up over time, so that even though he's selling and reducing his number of units over time, the value will more or less stay the same. But the problem is when there's a downturn, that unit price, let's take an extreme example and say it goes to 50 cents. Well, now instead of selling 6,000 units, he has to sell 12,000 units to get that $6,000. So as the share market recovers, which it will do over time, unfortunately, he's got so many less units in the fund that he never recovers fully his value. Whereas Jane, very similar portfolio, except she has her own investments. She has a cash account. All the income, all the dividends goes into that cash account, and it's only from cash that Jane draws her $6,000 a month. So she can leave all of her investments intact. They all drop in value, same as Max's did, but she doesn't touch them. She doesn't sell them while they're down in value, and she's got the time to leave them there for them to recover. And you can see that when the market recovers back to its original level, Jane has $838,000 in her fund, whereas Max, because he's sold so many of his units, he only has $375,000 in the fund. So this can make just such a huge difference And if there's one thing that you take away around the structure of your investments, it's this. All right, so superannuation, it's one of the last free lunches that we've got in Australia. It's a fantastic savings tool, so let's spend some time talking about that. Why is superannuation such a good savings tool? Well, one, on the way in, when you're working and contributing to super, it's reducing your own personal income tax, so saving you tax. The earnings within the fund whilst you're working and accumulating, they're tax effective. Once you retire, those earnings are tax-free. For savings for retirement, and I love talking to 30 or 40-year-olds about superannuation, and they say, well, why should I put money in super now? I can't access it for so long. That's tomorrow's problem. They're all about living for now. But I actually challenge them on that and say, well, superannuation is the enabler of today's lifestyle, because if you're contributing, if you know that you're putting money away for tomorrow and that you're going to be comfortable at retirement, that's what enables you to have the peace of mind today to be able to get on with living life as you want to, without that anxiety. Superannuation, it's an effective estate planning tool. We'll talk about that shortly. And of course, in retirement, you can draw tax-free retirement income. So a lot of benefits to superannuation. Let's talk about how we get money into superannuation. There's two methods called concessional or non-concessional contributions. You can think about this as before tax contributions or after tax contributions. Concessional contributions are what your employer puts in for you or what you might salary sacrifice or claim a tax deduction for, and you're limited to $30,000 per year. Non-concessional is after tax. So money you just might have in the bank account, you want to put that into superannuation, there's no tax consequence. You can put that in, you can do up to $120,000 per year. And you can also do 3 years in one. Bring forward rule where you can contribute up to $360,000 in 1 year, and then nothing for the next 2 years until that resets. Okay, now the benefit of concessional contributions here depends on what your personal income is. You can see here in the first $18,000 that you earn is tax-free. So if that was all your earnings were, there'd be no point making a concessional contribution because that's taxed at 15%. So you'd actually be worse off. You would just make that contribution as a non-concessional contribution. But as your income rises, the benefit of contributing to superannuation is greater. You'd see, say there in the bracket of 135,000 to 190,000, you typically pay 39% tax on your income, whereas into superannuation is a flat 15%. So you're saving 24 cents in the dollar, which is quite meaningful, all the way up to 250,000. And then above 250,000, we have an additional tax charge that the government levies. So instead of paying 15% on your contributions, you pay 30%, which slightly reduces the benefit, but it's still a benefit. So there's a big benefit to making concessional contributions, and if you can maximize your contribution level, really you should in the lead up to retirement. Often confused is the two phases of superannuation and how the earnings of a superannuation fund work. So accumulation phase is when you're working and contributing to super, and anything the fund earns is taxed at 15%, okay? And you can't access your balance until you make what they call as a condition of release, which is typically retirement. Once you do meet a condition of release, though, rather than leaving your superannuation in that accumulation phase, you can transfer it over into the pension phase. And it's in the pension phase where all the earnings are completely tax-free. So regardless of whether you need the money from super or not, there's a big advantage in moving from accumulation phase into the pension phase at retirement. Now, to compensate for that, the government says, okay, well, we're giving you tax-free earnings. However, we're going to force you to withdraw a minimum amount every year. And as you get older, we're going to make you take out more and more money because we don't want you leaving that accumulating in a tax-free environment. And you can see those percentages there on the right-hand side of that slide, growing as you age. So pension phase, a huge advantage. Really, everyone wants to be in pension phase once they've retired. Some of the other ways we can get money into superannuation, there's a little known rule called the catch-up concessional contribution rule. This can be very useful if you have a high taxable income coming into retirement, or maybe you sell a property or have a big capital gain that adds to your income in that particular year. So let's just have a quick look at how that might work. Important to note, this is for people who have a balance of under 500,000 at the 30th of June in the previous financial year. If you fit that bill, this is an example over 5 years of how this might work. So going back to financial year 2021, the limit on concessional contributions was 25,000. So let's say in that year you put in 15,000. You are actually allowed to carry forward that unused 10,000 into a future year. So the next year, FY22, you would have your normal 27,500 that applied in that year, plus the 10,000 carried forward. So you could make 37,500 contribution if you wanted to. Carry that forward over the years, and let's say financial year 25, where the cap is now $30,000 a year. So you have your normal $30,000 plus all those amounts that you've been able to bring forward from the previous financial years. Potentially, this person could make $107,000 tax deductible contribution to their super, which, if they've got a high taxable income or a capital gain from a sale of an asset, that could significantly reduce their tax bill. So that's something worth looking at. There's also some other little known rules. Every dollar counts, right? So the government co-contribution, if you're earning under $60,000, the government may match your contribution up to $500, so 50% of your contribution up to $500. So if you put in $1,000, government puts in $500. The spouse tax offset is another one. If you've got a non-working spouse or a low-income earning spouse under $40,000, if you put in up to $3,000 to their superannuation, you can claim a tax offset of $540 on your tax. So another saving, better in your pocket. And something that we're seeing used more and more now is the downsizer contribution rules, which is a really effective way to get some money into superannuation around retirement. So if you sell your principal place of residence after reaching age 55, you have to have owned that property for 10 years. If you meet that criteria, you can contribute up to $300,000 post-tax, after tax, into your superannuation. And this isn't impacted by any other limits. So usually there's a limit. It's currently 1.9 million. It'll be 2 million when we tick over the new financial year that you're allowed to have in superannuation. And once you hit that, you're not allowed to make any further after-tax contributions. But this is exempted, so you can still use this. And it's also per person, not per couple. So each member of the couple could put this $300,000 into super, meaning a total of $600,000 could go in. So very useful rule. And if you do downsize, or even if you just sell your property, it doesn't have to be a downsize, you may qualify for this rule, which is very useful. So we'll talk about estate planning for a minute. Very important to know that superannuation is not automatically an estate asset. You need to nominate a binding death benefit nomination, which binds the trustee of the superannuation fund to pay that money where you want it to go upon your death. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you're leaving it up to them to pay basically where they think is best. So you can have all sorts of people, putting forward their case as to why they should get it paid out, and then it's really up to them what happens. So you don't want to do that. So binding death benefit nomination, very important. Now, in Australia, we don't have death taxes, right? Well, we do by stealth, and the superannuation death tax is up to 17%. So if your superannuation is paid out to a non-dependent, so typically that would be adult children, it can attract up to 17% tax. There are ways to reduce or potentially avoid that tax. So very important to plan that out, and we can hopefully do that before the age of 75, typically. So let's have a look at what a recontribution strategy is, which is one of the main ways to reduce this tax. Have a look at a case study. So here we've got Tom and Jane, who are 63. They've just retired. Jane has $720,000 in her account-based pension. Okay, so she's retired. She's transferred to that pension mode we spoke about. All of her superannuation was contributed by her employer over her working life through her standard contributions. And Tom was self-employed. He has no superannuation. Okay. So once Jane and Tom pass away, their kids are their beneficiaries, and they are adult kids. They would pay 17% tax on the remaining funds, which on those balances is $122,400. So how can we reduce that? Well, Jane, having retired, has met a condition of release. She can withdraw all of her superannuation completely tax-free into her bank account. So we do that. Then Jane and Tom, because they're under 75, we can contribute up to $360,000 under that bring forward rule for each of them into their superannuation tax-free. Okay, so we've taken $720,000 out of Jane's super tax-free, sit it in the bank account for a day. It goes back in, $360,000 into each of their accounts, and that just goes in as tax-free money. That money then is not subject to that tax. So if they pass away, their kids would receive that money tax-free. All right, so there is limits and so forth that apply. So not everyone can do it, and some people can only reduce the tax and not eliminate it fully. But that's an example of how it might work. Now, I just want to spend a minute talking about Division 296 tax, which is otherwise known as the $3 million superannuation cap. So with Labor winning a majority in the election, there is no doubt this legislation will quickly be back before Parliament and will be approved in some format. So we've been preparing this for some time. Now at this stage, the government wants that to take effect from the 1st of July this year. So how would that work? So firstly, it applies to individuals that have so individuals is an important thing, not a couple, it's individual based. And an individual with a total super balance greater than 3 million at the end of the financial year. So if it was to come in on the 1st of July this year, the 30th of June 2026 is really the relevant date that we're looking at. Okay, and you must have had positive earnings during that year for the tax to apply. The additional tax rate is 15%, and that tax is applied to the portion of the balance that's above 3 million. Now, at this stage, under the previous proposals, the $3 million threshold was not to be indexed. Remains to be seen whether that's the case in the new legislation. And how this works is very different to existing taxes, existing earnings taxes in superannuation funds. because it's largely irrelevant what the actual earnings of your fund are. At the moment, tax is paid on actual earnings. In this case, though, it's just taking the superannuation balance at the start of the year and the superannuation balance at the end of the year. So in other words, unrealised capital gains would be taxed. So we'd be the first place in the world, I believe, to tax unrealised capital gains. So look, it remains to be seen. We'll see what the final legislation looks like and when it's implemented. And anyone impacted will obviously be in contact with. But we've been planning for this for some time. There's a range of alternatives that are available to us if this comes about. And now I want to spend some time just talking about the transition to retirement. I spoke at the start about being mentally and financially prepared for retirement. And we've spoken through some of the finances in terms of how much you need and structuring your superannuation and investments. But the mental and emotional preparation is often the thing that people struggle with the most. And retirement, it's potentially a long time, like we talked about, and really, in reimagining retirement, a time of new beginnings, new experiences. You can't just play golf 365 days a year. What are you going to do with your time? What do you really want to achieve out of retirement? And we've got a range of tools and resources and experience from working with thousands of families who've retired to help people through this journey. And the emotional transition out of the workforce is one that a lot of people really struggle with because our work gives us a lot of things. It gives us activity in our day. We get social connection, obviously, out of our workmates, work colleagues. We get a sense of accomplishment and status, which is important, real purpose and direction, and of course, the routine and structure of our time, which going from that to having totally unstructured time in retirement can be a real struggle. So it's really putting some purpose and thought into this. What do I want to achieve? How do I want to spend my time? And again, I'd like to run another quick poll of the room just to see what people think is the most important thing for them in retirement. So let me put this poll up on screen quickly. So I'll launch this poll. What's your number one aim in retirement? Is it to have enough money? Is it to travel the world? Is it staying involved in work, maintaining relationships with family and friends, being happy, or maybe there's something else. I'll just give everyone a few seconds to complete that, and I'll share the results. Okay, thanks everyone. I'll close that off. So I'll share those results on the screen. You can see there we had 50% of people saying be happy, quite a lot saying relationship with family and friends, and a few saying having enough money and traveling the world, which is great. So a variety of responses, which is fantastic. I find this fascinating. You might have heard of this. Bronnie Ware, she was an Australian palliative care nurse, and she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. So she was sitting there with people on their deathbed, interviewing them, saying, what do you regret about your life? And this was the top 5 responses. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I let myself be happier. And I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. So there's nothing there about, I wish I had more money to spend. And I think that there's a real message in that. And, this is a big phase of our life nowadays, something that we need to put a lot of purpose and thought into. What do we really want to achieve? And what's going to make us happy? It's an individual thing, but it's your choice. And I say choose happiness. And I'm pleased to see that so many of you selected be happy as your number one aim. So mental and financial preparation. we really see as the key to achieving that, and the difference between those we see who do have peace of mind and get on living their life and those that don't. So planning for retirement, you can go it yourself. People try to do that, and some people will make that work for them. We traditionally see a lot of people who just use hope as a strategy, make all these decisions that are really just guesses and hope that it works out. That's not a strategy. So Apt Wealth Partners, we've been working with clients on retirement for decades. We now look after over 3,000 Australian families and help them manage over $3 billion of funds, an award-winning firm with experts in a range of different fields to help you through this. So if you've missed some of our other events, last week we ran an estate planning webinar. It was one of our most highly watched events for the year. If you missed that, I encourage you to check that out, a very important topic. Next month we'll be running a webinar on the aged care system. If you've got family or friends going into the aged care system, all the rules are changing as of the 1st of July. So we'll run an event to help people prepare for that. And in July, we've got an event on cybersecurity. We invest a lot of money and time into cybersecurity at Apt Wealth Partners, and we want to share those tips and advice with all of you to keep you safe, protected from scams, protected from fraud, etc. So I encourage you to tune into those events. So really how we work with people, how we help them in retirement, it's all about that peace of mind to live the way they want to live. So understanding your investments, really drilling down to work out what your desired lifestyle is, what that's going to cost, what is your number, then maximising the amount of income we can generate, surviving the market downturns, maximising government benefits, and helping you plan and prepare for that emotional and financial transition. So that brings me to the end of today's presentation. I've got some time for question and answer. If you want to use the Q&A box with any questions that have come up through today, just have a look at a couple of questions here. First one, I have an allocation to shares, but I don't think I own my own shares. Is it possible to own your own shares in superannuation? Yes, it is. So as we discussed, that structure of owning your own investment, most superannuation funds in Australia will let you do that. Some don't, but I strongly suggest finding one that does allow you to do that because of the difference that it makes. Another question here, how could I eliminate the super beneficiary tax if I'm a person with over $500,000 in my super? So this is a question with multi parts to the answer. You can't do that. You can't eliminate the tax in one hit because we can only contribute 360,000 over a 3-year period. But we could take 360,000 out, put it back in 3 years' time. We could do the same thing again, and that would have eliminated the tax. What are the pros and cons of working part-time? Okay, great question. We could spend the whole hour talking about this question. If you are on an age pension from the government, your pension entitlement will be offset by the amount of income that you earn. So that can be one disadvantage. However, there is an amount that they let you earn where they don't offset any payment, and you'd still be better off working than just relying on the age pension. It's about 20 cents in the dollar that of the pension that gets eliminated. So you're still 80 cents in the dollar better off working. I think one of the real benefits of working part-time, apart from financially, obviously financially, it helps to supplement your income. It means you'd have to take less of your own resources. You give your own investments more time to grow and build up over that period until you start drawing on them fully. So financially, that's the advantage. But keeping our mind active. You see these people that they just get to the age, and it's that old life cycle that we spoke about. People retire, do nothing, their mental state goes down, their physical state goes downhill quickly. So, most people nowadays we're seeing stay involved in some aspect, whether it's paid work, volunteer work, passion work, whatever it is, to keep that mind and body active. Can you send me the slides? Yes, we'll send out a full recording of today's session. A superannuation fund that doesn't do a beneficiary nomination, what are the options? We would have to talk to that superannuation fund to explore the options there. If not, potentially your estate planning with your lawyer, you might be able to allow for it through that. Any other questions? Do I need a self-managed superannuation fund to hold my own investments? Well, no, you don't. A self-managed super fund is one of the options that you've got to hold your own investments, but many regular superannuation funds will allow you to do that. All right, looks like that's knocked off most of the questions from today's session. If there are more questions that come through when we send out the recording to everyone, we'll endeavour to answer those questions for you. If you have any queries from today, please reach out to myself, reach out to your Apt Wealth advisor, or if you don't have an Apt Wealth advisor, please contact me directly, and we're happy to put you in touch with one and help you with that planning. So thanks everyone for joining us. I mentioned that some of our upcoming events. I encourage you to register for those as those invites come out. Otherwise, have a great day. Good to spend the time with you. See you next time.